Hey, what's up everyone? This is Mysteria, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how I made my remix of Billie Eilish's track, Bad Guy. I'm also giving away all of these samples and presets I used in the track for free, so check those out in the description below. Now this remix has turned out to be one of my biggest tracks to date, racking up well over 500,000 plays online, gaining DJ support from guys like Alesso, Timmy Trumpet, Benzi, and even getting played at TomorrowLand this year. And as I've been touring around the US more and more these past few months, it's been a staple in almost every one of my sets. Now I've gotten a lot of production questions on this remix the past few months, so I thought it'd be cool to make a video showing you how I did it, and hopefully give you some strategies you can use in your own remixes in the future. Like I said, all of these samples and presets I use in the track are available for free download. You can find that link in the description below. But if you have any questions on anything in this tutorial, please comment them below and I'll be happy to answer them as soon as I can. But enough about all that, let's dive into the tutorial. So at a high level here, you can see I have everything separated into 5 groups: drums, synths, basses, vocals, and the effects. And all of these groups are routed to my pre-master here. The reason I do this is just so that I can reference tracks here on the master channel. Here I always have Voxengo span, or I'll turn on auto filter and isolate certain frequencies so I can compare it without my master chain hitting those reference tracks. Yeah, so let's start with the drums. So once again, I have my drums separated into 3 groups here. Main drums, this is going to be my kick and clap mostly. So one thing to notice here is that in certain sections in these breaks, I'm high passing my drums. Let's see this. Yeah, you can see here I'm high passing it, and that's just to take some of the energy away from the drums. Those low end frequencies are going to have the most energy. So when you cut those out during certain sections, it can kind of help create movement and help build the energy up to that next section when the full frequencies do come in. So you see right in the intro here, just the high frequencies. My drums, let's see, I use a drum rack for my kicks, claps, all that stuff. Here I have in a whole instrument rack. This is just so I can send MIDI sidechain to all these groups. It's a whole nother complex thing I'm not going to go into right now. But yeah, just basic kick. Sounds good. I did almost nothing to it. Clap. So this is one thing I like to do is layer claps to kind of alternate the width. So you see here in the drop. So it's like boom, narrow, boom, wide. And I think that just kind of creates a little more interesting of a drum pattern for listeners. Another thing I do is I will kind of create these sweeps into it. Once again, alternating the length on those sweeps. The claps, not too much going on. So you see on these wide ones, I have all the middle all scraped out. That's just to make sure they don't interfere with this main clap. Big, meaty center clap. Drum sharpener is doing a little bit to the transients. It's an awesome plugin within Ableton. Where is it? Drum bus. Yeah, super useful. And I just will sometimes affect the transients. And sometimes on the drum group, you can just add a straight up basic drum bus. And these default settings can be pretty cool. I'll just usually back off the dry wet. Yeah, something for you to try. Cool. Let's go on to the hats. So here there's kind of a lot of movement going on. First of all, we got this crash here. Just nice and wide. Did some processing to widen it up here. Compressing it a little bit, a little OTT to bring out the highs. Some saturation. Here we have the hats. So I'm doing something similar here to what I did with those claps and snares earlier. I have my main hats right here, these quarter notes. Pretty cool, pretty basic hat. There's some processing to glue these all together. But on the first hit, I have a wider hat. I have this guy. You can hear how wide that is. I actually widened it with this little rack I used right here. Didn't even scoop any of the lows out or anything because it's just high frequencies. And yeah, I thought that kind of made the drum pattern a little more interesting. Then I have this loop under it, just kind of carrying everything. When you are layering top loops, though, a lot of times they'll have a clap on it that you don't want, because it'll kind of mess up the existing clap structure you have going on. So one thing I do is with LFO tool, I scoop it out. So here's a loop without it. You see how it kind of takes the clap away and lets those hats shine through. So that's a cool trick you can do if you're using top loops. Yeah, as the drop goes on, a cool thing to do is layer more hats to keep that keep the energy going. You know, nothing special here. Once again, taking the actually this is doing nothing. We have these reverses, and this is kind of a cool thing you can do to just keep that movement in the song, sweeping the listener into the next thing. Pretty cool little trick. Then I kind of layer them up here. Pretty cool. I have these little things at the end. Just kind of a cool little fill thing to make the that section more interesting. During the last part of the section, I have this little loop I found. I thought it was cool because it reminded me of the little percussion pattern Billie Eilish actually has in the song in the last part of her chorus. So I just kind of affected it, made something that sounded similar pattern, and I thought it sounded pretty cool. So those are the drums and the hats. So we're left with this so far. Definitely got the basic drum beat down here. Let's see if there's anything to talk about here. So the next piece is going to be these fills. And this is the third section I have in my drums. Nothing special, just a basic drum build here, building up that tension. Just basic, using them in a drum rack, just building them up. Here's a little Ableton rack I use to help sweep the frequencies up, so you can see over the course of the build, I'm cutting these lows, sweeping them up, turning on the auto pan, because I kind of have them panning at the beginning just to make a little bit of movement. Almost like a drummer with his right and left hand, you know? Right, left, right, left. That's kind of what I was thinking there. I have some more fills, just kind of to accent the drum pattern. Just some random fills here and there. Little fills like this are a cool way to kind of show your listener that that section is ending, you're transitioning into a new section. Same with some of these reverse cymbals, same kind of thing. Just keeping that movement going, showing them where they are in the song. Now let's move on to the synths. Let's see, yeah, no processing on these really. All right, synths. So here's what this group sounds like as a whole. The beginning, we just have some of those kind of percussive synths underneath the hats, just adding some tonality there. And then we have this kind of reverse sweep cymbal thing, reverse sweep synth thing. Now this other one comes in underneath the hats. So you see, right, when it comes to the verse, there's some of these kind of washed out synths, kind of just. So it's just, this one's just a synth sample with just kind of EQ'd and some delay, just kind of space it out, fill out the mix right there. And then once again, I took that bounced kind of reverb out sample and reversed it. So as you can see here, I have these ones, these are pitched, these are all in key. I think this song is in the key of G. So then these are pitched up 2 from F to put them in key. And then I kind of have a call and response with these lower ones. These are both an octave down. Just kind of hear that the effect that makes. Just another percussive synth like I talked about. It's just a piece of a sample, just some glue, some OTT, some Camel Crusher,
a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay. And this one's pretty wide. This one is adding some stereo width on the side of those hats because it's going right there. Because in the middle, there's already all those hat frequencies and there's this other synth we have going on. So the sides are kind of what needed it there. And then in the full break, so cool little pattern there to kind of help fill things out. Here's what we have so far with the drums. You can hear how these reverb delay synths are really filling things out. And now this synth is being used as a build here. It's another little point right there. Let's see how I did it in this one. When you are doing kind of reverby things like this, like for example, did I use Endless Smile here? Yeah. So this is a cool plugin to kind of create buildups or tensions of the song. It adds reverb and delays and kind of washes things out in a cool way. So I'll do this a lot of times during buildups, but those tails from your reverbs, whether it's in the synth itself or a reverb on a synth or one of the channels or something, sometimes it'll ring out past the drop and even into the drop. So something you want to usually do is mute it. See this what I did right here. All these frequencies building up, boom, mute, and also the dry wet on Endless Smile drops right there. So nothing's coming through, nothing's interfering with the vocal and the silence I want to have there. And then as far as group processing, so in this track, I actually did some sidechain compression. Usually I'll do volume automation, but I thought it sounded better in this case. And I just have it mapped to a kick trigger up here. This is just a quick little percussive sound. And that way I can have more control. Because if I use the full kick, I have less control of the signal. I would have to have the release all the way down. But with a quick little percussive sound, I can have a little more control and kind of push the release up a little bit. Have the ratio at 2:1 and the threshold at minus 58 dB. And this is something you're going to play with on each individual track, seeing what sounds good and referencing sidechain to other tracks, making sure it's up to par. And yeah, it's about all I had going on here with these synths. Now let's move on to the basses. All right, so here's the bass. We have a lot going on here. Some of the stuff is grouped, others is not. As you'll hear in a second, not every sound in here is exactly bass. It's just when I'm producing, I go super quick and just throw everything in there within the section that I'm working on. So yeah, how does that sound like? So as you can hear, a lot of stuff. So here's what some of this stuff sounds like. Here's just an accent on the melody on top of that bass line. Some lasers. Here's the main bass line. And if you're listening in headphones, you'll hear one of the tricks I did to make this a little more interesting is I alternated the width. So here, the first hit comes in wide, and then it narrows up for a few hits, and then another. So first hit comes in wide, then these narrow hits, then another wide hit. So as you can see here, one of the things I did just to give it that width is increase the voices to 2 and add a little detune to it. Hear the difference that makes? Unless you have headphones, you probably, or monitors, you probably can't. So I would suggest listening on one of those. And this is just a cool thing I did to make the bass sound more interesting, is push this up 7 semitones, up a fifth, And it just kind of gives it some cool tonality, a little bit of FM here. Once again, this patch and all the samples from this will be available for free downloads. You can just grab those, play around with them yourself. And then to process these together, nothing crazy, just a little bit of multi-band right here, right on the peak, just kind of controlling everything. And then I have some lasers, just kind of going at the end of this lead. So there's all this kind of stuff just sitting on top of the bass line, moving the listener along, keeping them interesting things to listen to. Nothing crazy here. And just doing a little bit of compression, a little bit of OTT, 10%. Just some British clean, great saturation, plug in right here. And then controlling the highs, a little bit more saturation, and just some stuff with LFO tool. Just eighth note LFO. And then we have some of these going on. So this is just kind of building up into that next section. Then we have this lead going. Performing a similar purpose to those reverse risers, just kind of helping move the listener along, sweeping them into the next thing. I hear a little popping here. Obviously didn't hear in the mix, but one thing you can do with the LFO tool to help counteract that is adjusting the smooth function here. But in the mix, it didn't really make a difference, so left that. That's a cool thing to do. We have this going. And we just have this little bass going on. Nothing crazy. Just a little brassy kind of hit. We got these two things. Little vocal chops. Little perk thing. It's just little kind of ear candy stuff to make it more interesting. As a whole, I didn't really do too much stuff to glue this together. I do have it all going into this limiter just to catch some of these peaks, but it's not really doing too much at all. And yeah, so I'll talk a little bit. Same kind of sidechain settings as these synths have. A little bit more release though, it looks like. Yeah, just to make room in those lower frequencies for the kick, I guess. This is just what sounded good. There's no right or wrong answer here. Next piece is vocals, which is my favorite part of the song, working with Billie Eilish's vocals. She obviously has an amazing voice. So here's what this stuff sounds like.
Tough guy like you. Bruises on both my knees.
So let's start at the beginning. Because here already I have these little chops. Just these little one hits.
White shirt now.
So I have these reverse vocals. So what I'll do there is I'll just show you really quick how this works. So if you have this vocal coming in, you take the first syllable.
White.
So in this case, white. So you want that wha thing kind of coming in to kind of drag the listener into it. So this is one way you can do that. Alright, so it's just big reverb out thing. A lot of times, at this point, I'll process that reverb. I'll add some OTT or saturation or whatever to help bring it out. But for simplicity's sake, this is what we're working with right now. Boom. Take the very beginning off. And then reverse it. And then this sweeps you right into that vocal. And that's what I did here. You know, and another cool trick is to do the same thing.
White shirt.
With the first syllable. Like there, I did it with the bruises on both my knees. And I just kind of used it there, but you can hear that right here. What you do is you take the first syllable, so here.
Bruises.
You take that first syllable, that brew, reverse it, add delay, bounce that to audio, and then reverse that. And then the syllables, the words are facing the right way again. And another cool way to kind of sweep your listener into it. So that's what's going on there. See, look at all these reverb, just kind of sweeping and filling out the mix.
Beatles creeping around.
Just some reverb tails, just giving everything some air. Pitched it down, took the performance up, just kind of make it more interesting.
Creeping around like no one knows. Think you're so criminal. Bruises on both my knees for you. Don't say thank you. Oh, please, I do what I want when I'm wanting to. My soul, so cynical. So you're a tough guy, like you really rough guy.
And then here, one thing I did is turn the syllable,
I'm the bad.
that bad, into like a build. Pitched it up here, 12 semitones. So once again, I have this reverse kind of reverb doing the same job as a build. And yeah, so let's go to the drop. As far as vocal processing, this is not going to be a great tutorial for that because her vocals, the way I had them, these were already processed. These are just the vocals from the song, so the stereo width is there, the backing vocals are there, all that stuff is there, so I didn't really have to do anything besides I chose to add a little bit of OTT. But yeah, so let's go to the drop now. Just kind of some stuff to help fill it out, add some air.
Tough guy like you.
So the purpose of this thing, this little this is underneath that big lead. Just kind of help fill it out, add a little bit more energy. Here's what it sounds like in context. Just kind of some vocal elements to help things move along, to help glue things together. Us as humans, we naturally like the sound of other organic things, especially other human voices and sounds. So if you're able to subtly incorporate small vocal pieces under the drums in a percussion pattern, however you do it, it can really subconsciously make your listener more interested in the song and give it more of an organic feel. So I had a lot of fun doing that stuff here. And yeah, that's about all we have going on for the vocals. Same stuff in the other sections. And lastly, the effects. All right, here we are on the final section, the effects. I do a lot more effects than a lot of other tech house producers do, just because I like those big, atmospheric, airy mixes. I also have more channels than most other producers do in my project, and I want to explain why. As you can see, in a single channel, for the most part, I only have the same kind of sound at the same volume. That way, when I'm actually mixing a project or producing, I quickly have volume control over any sound just right there. Whereas if you have a bunch of different sounds in the same channel and you're trying to do stuff, it can just be a lot more cumbersome. So that's why I have everything on its own channel. But let's listen to what this sounds like as a whole. So to start, just a clock thing, some percussion, just ticking. Nothing special here, but it is pushed pretty wide just to make room for those hats and drums in the middle. Also have some rain going on. Super quiet, just to help give it kind of an environment, put it in a place. And then some sweeps, just some breath stuff. Nothing too crazy, just pretty similar to what we were doing before. You know, nothing crazy, just kind of airy in this section right here when that vocal break comes in, and then we're coming up into the big build here. Boom. This big guy starts. This is coming in. So you can hear how much stuff we have going on into this build to help really give it that power and fullness we were looking for. And when layering these things together in a drop, always listen in context to all this stuff to see what sounds good. Because if you're adding a bunch of risers and effects and you solo the effects group or whatever, it might sound good, but in context it won't. Just make sure anytime you're adding a sound that it also sounds good in the context of the whole track. But it doesn't necessarily need to sound good alone. Like there's tons of sounds in my tracks that don't sound good alone, but they serve a function. So just make sure it sounds good in context. But enough about that. Here's what the drop sounds like as far as the effects go. Just some exhaust, just white noise, wide white noise. And it's just some crowd noise underneath. This is kind of a little bit of a white noise trick to help fill things out and give that perceived feeling of people cheering under the drop. Something I learned from Skrillex a long time ago when listening to his tracks. And white noise down. Nothing crazy. Just some more rain in the drop, just ambience. And then these guys just sweeping things around. Little vocal chant right on the drop. Just more crowd stuff, kind of people cheering on the drop. It can sound really good live. Like I've heard a lot of tracks drop live where there's people screaming in the song, and it sounds like people are screaming in the venue. So it can be give you a really cool effect. More reverse stuff, but honestly, everything is kind of relying on what's going on in the bass group throughout the drop. In the last section, I have this riser just building up. It's a riser I made. I think it's pretty simple. Yeah, nothing too crazy going on there. But yeah, and then it just kind of builds up and does the same thing again. Nothing too interesting here. And as far as processing, I don't think I did too much. Nothing to really glue it together. Just on the ones that needed it, make sure the lows were cut in the right places. And that's about it, guys. Let's go into what the master rack looks like here. I do a little bit of automation with Endless Smile in this track, just helping sweep the listener up over the course of the build, adding a little bit of reverb and space. Kind of subtle difference to help sweep the listener up. I also do a little bit of automation in terms of volume, turning it down just a couple dB over the course of the build. Because sometimes when you're adding all these risers, drums, effects, all this stuff, the build can become louder than the drop. And when that happens, it takes away all the energy and power out of the drop. So to counteract that, I'll just turn it down a couple dB. Super easy, just enough to make sure that drop has enough contrast where it hits and is powerful enough. And then onto the actual mastering here. I don't do a lot of mastering in my tracks. I try to just do everything in the mix and then have just some subtle stuff for loudness here. But first thing I have is a utility, and all this is doing is just boosting the volume because all these are down. All these groups are down quite a bit, as you can see. And I have my bass mono below 150 hertz just for that clean stereo mix. Next I have Fab Filter Pro L doing some limiting. Quite a few dB. And a lot of people might say, yo, that's way too much limiting that's going on. It's not how you're supposed to do it. And I don't care because it sounds fine to me. So that's what's going on with that one. You can look at these settings if you want. I think there's the default settings on Pro L. Then I have Ozone Maximizer doing the same thing. Just a little more loudness. Then I have Pro L finally on the end. Just doing a little bit more. This is kind of, I think this is called gain limiting, where you have a bunch of limiters doing a little bit of limiting in a row. And that can sound a lot better than having one limiter doing 10 dB of limiting or whatever. So that's one thing I try to do, and I'll use different limiters. Like I also use Invisible Limiter, it's a great one, or Ableton's limiter, which isn't so great. But yeah, that's about it.
All right, everyone, I think that's it. If you have any questions, please comment them below. I'll be happy to answer them as soon as I can. You can also grab all of the samples and presets I use for free. The link to download that is in the description below. But I think that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something. If you did, please subscribe so you can stay up to date on more tutorials and music in the future. But other than that, guys, yeah, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.